Good, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being at the Tuesday, July 28th, 2020 Montgomery County Council meeting. We have a good agenda today, a long agenda, so we're going to get started. Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements, changes to the agenda, or petitions? Madam Clerk, are you there?
Mr. President, I can see her and she's unmuted, but her audio's not coming through. She can hear us, but
okay,
yeah.
I can't see for some reason. Let me see if I can get, there we go. I can see her too. Madam Clerk, can you hear us? You can hear us, but we can't hear you. Is there someone else that can, if not, I will read the various. Oh, there you go. Is that you?
No, this is Marlene Michelson.
Okay.
You do have the addendum in front of you, and
I do.
President Katz, perhaps if you just want to read it out loud, and Ms. Singleton, if you can text me to let me know if there's anything else you were going to make the council aware of other than these items, I can announce that as well.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you, Ms. Michelson. Well, we do have many different additions to the agenda this morning. On the change to item under consent calendar, an action item, the special supplemental appropriation to the Department of Health and Human Services for the operating budget for $250,000 for mental health program to support schools. We have that's a change. We have added item P, which is an introduction and / action resolution to urge the governor to extend his executive order limiting the eviction of tenants who lost income due to COVID-19. The lead sponsor is the county council. We've added item Q, introduction special appropriation to the county government's FY21 operating budget early care and education non-departmental account for $75,000 for Montgomery moving forward, coordinating entity plan. The source of funds is the general funds reserve, an amendment to FY21 operating budget resolution 19-472, section G, FY21, designations of entities for non-competitive contract award status, nonprofit Montgomery. The lead sponsor is the county council. We have added item R, introduction special appropriation to the county government's FY21 operating budget, Department of Recreation for $500,000 for countywide program, Youth Sports Initiative, source of funds, general funds reserve, and Office of Community Use of Public Facilities, the $500,000 for a facility fee assistance program, Youth Sport Initiative, source of funds, federal grant. Lead sponsor is the county council. We have added item S, introduction special appropriation to the county government's FY21 operating budget, COVID-19 Human Services and Community Assistance non-departmental account NDA support for COVID-19 response, $550,000 for a youth sports initiative, source of funds, federal grant, and an amendment to fiscal year 2021, operating budget resolution 19-472, section G, FY21, designation of entities for non-competitive contract award status, Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families. Lead sponsor is the County Council, and added the introduction / action for resolution to amend FY21 operating resolution, budget resolution 19-472, section G, FY21, designation of entities for non-competitive contract award status, Bethesda Cares. And I do know that there has been one update for item under public hearings. the public hearing on the special appropriation for Housing Opportunities Commission FY21 capital budget and amendment to the FY21-26 capital improvements program in the amount of $2,800,000 for the Housing Production Fund. That is a public hearing. It will only be a public hearing. It will not be an action item today. And with that, is there anything in addition?
I have not received any messages from Ms. Singleton, and if she does get in touch with us, we'll add them later on.
Council President Katz, this is Linda McMillan.
Yes,
I believe Ms. Singleton also added a 21.6, which is a non-competitive contract amendment for the Primary Care Coalition, which is related to your action on Port Nuestra Salud, and that would be after the Bethesda Cares item that was added.
Well, I believe it's 21.5. Is that the one you're saying?
No, this is a new one that came in even after that.
Okay. Well, very good. Thank you. And hopefully Ms. Singleton can get back with us so that she can keep us going just as you have, Mr. Miller. Thank you very much. And with that, the minutes have been distributed for May 4th, 2020. Unless there are any corrections, they will be approved as received. I see no one jumping up and down, so they are approved as received. The next item that we have is the consent calendar. I do need a motion and a second. Is there a motion? It's been moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Claes. And with that, Councilmember Joando, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to my colleagues and to the public. There are many things on this consent calendar. I'm just going to speak to one that I took the lead on and appreciate all of my colleagues for signing on, and it's from the County Council, and I know we all care about this deeply. It's item P, the resolution to urge the governor to extend his executive order limiting evictions of tenants who have lost income due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is his order is set to expire at the end of this month. We now are going on 3 or 4 months, depending on the severity of people who have been laid off and the economic impact of residents who have not paid their rent and or their mortgage. And in this case, we're talking about renters. Many people have been forced to work reduced hours or have been laid off. This has caused serious economic harm. So along with my colleagues today, we are introducing this emergency resolution that we'll introduce and pass today, calling on the governor to extend his executive order limiting the evictions of tenants. When he declared the state of emergency, Governor Hogan, back in March, no one dreamed that we didn't know how long this was going to last. We did know that we were in for a long, long battle, and that the damage both to the health, life, and safety and economic vitality of our residents would be significant. It's anticipated nationally that 20 to 28 million people will face eviction potentially between now and September. That's 3 to 4 times as many people who have lost their homes during the last financial crisis. I just want to repeat that. 3 to 4 times is a potential magnitude here if we don't act between the financial crisis of 2007 and 2016. In June, we're thankful the governor announced there was $30 million in funding for eviction prevention services for the whole state, and this is important, but again, will not be nearly enough to stave off the potential wave of evictions absent state action, and certainly we want federal action as well, as this moratorium on evictions is set to expire on August 1. So we would ask that we're calling on the governor to extend this eviction moratorium to at least January 31st, 2021. It's our hope by then the pandemic will have a better handle on it as far as the economic impact and also the health impacts. We're also hopeful that federal action will happen and we'll be able to support our residents and have a plan in place and work out as many agreements as possible. So that is the minimum. This follows action by our state delegation led by our great chair, Kumar Barve, who sent a similar letter and called on the governor to extend the eviction moratorium until January 31st. So we are supporting that full throttle. We see it here in Montgomery County. A study by the Aspen Institute recently said that 356,000 Marylanders, or 19%, almost 20% of all renters in the state, face the possibility of eviction by September 30th. So this is critical as we try to keep people safe, as we try to get the virus under control, and as we maintain the health, wealth, and safety of our residents. So I appreciate my colleagues' support on this, and please, Governor Hogan, extend this for a date certain so that we're not worried about it every couple of weeks or month, and a minimum January 31st. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I did see in the news this morning that the Attorney General, Brian Frosch, is also supportive of this and is working on this as well. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everybody. You're right. There's a lot of good things on this agenda as usual. I'm going to speak to two of them real quickly. One is item E. Very happy to see the special appropriation for mental health programs at MCPS moving forward. We all know that there's a tremendous amount of stress felt by our young people right now at all levels that's really distracting them from their learning. Younger children just feel unsafe and uncertain with all the changes, and older students are worried about the economy and how it affects their future as well. I've heard that from so many constituents and heard that over and over at the two town halls that I held with MCPS and Montgomery College students. That increased stress really can distract our students from fully focusing on their studies, and I'm really glad to see it moving forward. I'm grateful to Council Members Rice and Albornoz for their leadership on that issue. And I just wanted to call my colleagues' attention to item G, the OLO report on parent organizations in the public schools. And I'm very grateful to Kristen and Chris at OLO for another outstanding report about our school system. They've exposed inequities in our school system in the past. I had requested this report about the key resources that PTSAs and other nonprofits bring to our schools individually. We all appreciate the investments that families and communities voluntarily make to enhance our schools, whether it's professional development for our teachers or after school for children, or brick and mortar improvements. But the trouble is that often can increase disparities that exist among our schools. And the data available for the report confirms the same overall pattern of opportunity gaps in our public schools depending on the student body's wealth. In my district, we have higher poverty schools with PTAs with smaller budgets. Their resources are really stretched. That's not the case in other areas. This is going to be, I think, a long discussion, and we could use better data. It would have been very helpful to have more details of the school's private funding budgets to pursue transparency and put together a more comprehensive report. But I'm grateful for their recommendations that the school system should conduct an annual needs assessment of every school and potentially create equity funds to redistribute a percentage of donations to schools with the greatest needs. So more to continue, but I'm really grateful for the report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to limit my comments to just a few of the items on the consent calendar. First is item E, the funding for the mental health support for our students. We had a really engaging conversation at the committee level, at the joint committee level, to talk about the incredible need. And one of the data points I shared there, but I think it is so critically important to share now as well, is that a study in 2018 found that for every 5% increase in the national unemployment rate, there's an astonishing 35 to 50% increase in childhood mental health trauma. And so now, as we face record unemployment and an uncertain economic situation, not only here in Montgomery County, in the state of Maryland, and across the country, this type of investment is critically important because the science shows the correlation between economic uncertainty and childhood trauma. And so I applaud my colleagues for drafting that and moving that forward. Moving on to item K, the resolution to change the state song, Maryland, My Maryland. I appreciate all my colleagues' support of the resolution that I drafted. And I just want to take 30 seconds to say that since we introduced it a few weeks ago, I've had a number of constituents reaching out to me and thanking us collectively for standing up on the right side and correcting the history that this song embodied. And Jan Wessling, constituent here in Montgomery County, wrote me with a whole new poem. And I will share that with our colleagues in Annapolis. But I just want to read you one stanza from that poem that I think would be so beautiful to add to our new state song. And so this is the stanza. Refuge for those who came to flee, old world strife and misery. Deep in my soul, she calls to me, Maryland, my Maryland. And so I think that is beautiful, as we are a melting pot, and here in Montgomery County, home to 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in the entire country. And we welcome everybody, and that is my Maryland. I know that's your Maryland as well. So thank you, Ms. Wessling, for writing that in, and I will share that with our colleagues in Annapolis. Also, real quick, item N, contract awards to be able to help with housing relief, essentially, and a youth drop-in center. We know that at this point in time, as was just mentioned by Councilmember Jawanda, we want to make sure people are able to stay in our homes, and provide support, additional support for those who are experiencing homelessness. So I appreciate the executive team for putting forth those contracts in an expedient way to help our nonprofit partners do the vital work. And then lastly, item P, which Councilmember Wando just spoke eloquently about. I appreciate his leadership in drafting that resolution. And today we're going to be joining the state attorney, Brian Frosch, and so many other state senators and delegates in calling on the governor to do the right thing. Rent is due in a week, and this crisis is only going to continue. And there are so many other items that we'll be taking up later today, including the $20 million in rental assistance, also a special appropriation to help Bethesda Cares. And so today I really hope is Housing Day, so that at the end of the day, people feel comforted in what we are doing here in Montgomery County to make sure that they are able to keep a roof over their heads and stay healthy and safe during this pandemic. So thank you to all my colleagues and all the staff for putting forth a very thoughtful and vital consent calendar. I yield back.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also associate myself with my colleagues' remarks. This is an extraordinary agenda today. I think it speaks volumes to what we've been doing, which is to address the issues facing us with regards to this pandemic, but also continuing to move the ball forward and so many other policy issues that need to be taken care of, especially right before we go into recess. I want to bring up to your attention item C, which is the resolution to authorize Montgomery County to procure lines of credit for the purpose of providing funds for the payment of operating expenses. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee did approve this 3-0 with 2 amendments. One was a technical amendment that I think clarifies in a better way the intent of renewals and repayments for the lines of credit, and then also a sunset date, which is December 31st, 2022. As you know, the executive is requesting that the council authorize the Department of Finance to procure up to $300 million in lines of credit to cover operating expenses. Our Office of Legislative Oversight did share with us that while borrowing credit is not recommended for normal swings in the economic cycle, it is a tool that can be used in cases of extreme economic distress. And that's exactly what we are facing. We did have some conversation about this during our budget. This was, at least for me, one of the particular reasons why I put forth that resolution that we all voted on to make sure that our budget was a continuity of operations budget and that we held the line on those additional expenses that were not COVID-19 related, particularly because, as has been said already, we don't really know when things are going to get better, and we don't really know what our fiscal situation will look like. So this is why we and the GO committee did approve this particular proposal. We think it's wise. We believe that it is important to recognize that this is a very unique time. It is the first time in history that the county has applied for something like this, and I think it was warranted, and I applaud the Finance Department and the Executive for being proactive in this way. The other item I would like to bring up to your attention, it's one that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's item 2Q. As all of you know, we've been engaged in early care and education efforts for quite a while. One of the areas of great interest to me when I was a commissioner for the White House under the Obama administration in the area of education, I focused my work there in the area of early childhood education, early care and education. And one of the things that I concluded is that we needed to work towards some type of dedicated funding stream, and we needed to reframe the issue of early care and education as an economic imperative. We started working on some important bills and some important components. In 2015, Councilmember Reamer and I partnered. We each had some things we wanted to work on in this space, and we partnered, we collaborated, and we put forth a very important bill that created an enhancement initiative in this arena. It also created a position for a policy officer that would literally be in charge of monitoring and putting forth best practices for us to adopt, etc. Furthermore, we worked on looking at ways to study what a future governance structure could look like if we were to have a dedicated funding stream. And towards that end, I worked with the Office of Legislative Oversight and also with the Children's Opportunity Fund in Montgomery moving forward to start looking at some models. I strongly believe that a hybrid model is the best way to go. And Montgomery moving forward has been doing a lot of very important work in this space. The county executive just recently, last week, shared with us a proposal that they have as well. And what this introduction of item 2Q, what it does is that it provides $75,000 for Montgomery moving forward to work with the executive, with the Office of Legislative Oversight, and bring in some expertise to come up with a couple of models that we can then evaluate and hopefully adopt. I do believe that this is important. The one piece that Montgomery moving forward has done so successfully is that it has engaged the private sector in the early care and education space. That is a great, great accomplishment because we know nationally this has always been a challenge. And I think that we need to make sure that we leverage that collaboration. They actually are putting some money on the table in addition to the $75,000 and working with the administration and some experts. I think that we can come up with something that would really fit what Montgomery County is doing. Also, kudos to MCPS for stepping up and recognizing the importance of mental health services in this moment in time. They are so, I think, great to be commended because, you know, a lot of these issues cross over so many different areas and there's a lot of challenges that they have to address. And so in this joint committee, I think this conversation was very robust, especially when we talked about the challenges around cultural proficiency and language proficiency, how that relates to the provision of mental health services. And they're always meeting in that space. So I do want to thank Councilmember Albert Nelson Rice and also my colleagues in the HHS and Education and Culture Committee for continuing to have this conversation and continuing to move forward. That's all I have for now, but again, want to be on record saying that so much appreciate serving with all of you during this horrific and very difficult time because we have been working nonstop around the clock, doing everything we can to mitigate the impact of this pandemic while continuing to move forward our policy priorities. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. I will try to be very brief here. Just a couple items, and I'm not going to go in alphabetical order. Please do not tell Mrs. Lee, my kindergarten teacher. She'll be upset with me. But item E, the $250,000 for mental health support in MCPS. This is critical. The mental health challenges facing our community are growing. They have always existed, and we are struggling to keep up with them, and particularly now with all of the uncertainty and anxiety. This is a critical amount of support, and it dovetails well in an item that I've worked on with colleagues, Councilmembers Jawando and Albernaz later today, which we'll talk about more, supporting the crisis hotline. But it reflects the fact when we're talking about mental health, we need a holistic approach. It's in school, it's out of school, it's daytime, it's nighttime. This is an issue that is everywhere, and we need to be responding to it as such. So I just wanted to note that it's a really important item, and I really appreciate the work of the joint committees for pursuing this in MCBS as well. Echo the comments of the government operations chair referring to the line of credit. I think it's confusing to many residents, likely that given the challenges that we face fiscally and economically, that we have all these really important things on the agenda that we're spending money on, and we're trying to balance the fiscal and economic realities within the regular budget and invest the federal dollars that we're getting for the immediate emergency COVID response. And I'm really proud of the work that this council has done to date on that. But this line of credit, I think, is a sobering reminder of the fiscal and economic realities that we face, and it effectively is an insurance policy against a major economic downturn. It will be tough, potentially, for us to be able to meet our obligations and pay our bills as a county. I think it's the prudent decision and unprecedented action for an unprecedented moment. I appreciate the fact that we have the financial flexibility and the staff expertise to be able to do these sort of things, to put ourselves in a position to withstand even the worst of circumstances. But this is an example where we are certainly hoping for the best, whether it's federal support or a quicker turnaround to the public health emergency and the economic challenges that we're facing. But hope isn't a strategy, and we're actually doing something to prepare for the worst. And that's what really this item is with regard to item C. On item Q, the early childhood education coordinating entity plan, appreciate all of the leadership, Councilmembers Navarro and Albernaz and Reamer and others. We worked previously on the emergency response for our early childhood program providers who always have challenges and currently are in dire circumstances to be able to reopen and function in this new normal and this modified environment. But we need to address the broader issues for all times regarding this area. There's been a lot of work in the county and with the council on this, and I appreciate the work of Montgomery Moving Forward, in particular the business community. We talk a lot on many issues, but particularly with early childhood and its importance in our economy of getting buy-in from the business community. And this literally is buy-in from the business community, with the county putting up $75,000, the private sector putting up $25,000 in order to get a public-private entity established, so we can create the type of robust early childhood education coordinating entity and network that our families deserve and that our economy needs. A couple more items. Really appreciate item N, legal support for renters facing eviction. This is an area that the Fed Committee, Councilmembers Reamer, Jawando, and I talked a lot about. Ms. McMillan raised a number of points as we were looking at the renters assistance the county does, of the unique moment that we're in for renters, the unique challenges that are facing in this moment, and the need to change how we are viewing the type of support that the county provides, where legal is going to be even greater of a need. And I appreciate the executive branch stepping up, being responsive to those questions and concerns and comments. And putting this forward and for us to be approving it today. And lastly, I just want to congratulate Robert Donahoe, Katya Marin, and Andrew Jones on the Bethesda Urban Partnership Board of Directors. The streetery in Bethesda, all of the services that are provided. BUP is such an important part of creating the livable, walkable, accessible community for residents and businesses. And I congratulate those three for their appointment and appreciate their willingness to serve such an important organization for our community and our county. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Everyone has already said everything, so I'll just...
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. The next one, go ahead.
More or less. I was only going to single out the appropriation for legal aid, and I'll just emphasize, as Councilmember Friedson did, that tenants have rights, and the governor has created a right that you cannot be evicted for failure to pay your rent if your inability to pay is because of the impact of COVID-19. And so we need to work with our tenants in our nonprofit sector to provide legal assistance so that tenants can assert those rights. And so these are it's an important set of grants that we're going to provide to great organizations to help us kind of manage through this crisis. And if every tenant who is affected by COVID-19 is able to assert their rights, I think we're going to be in a much better position. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. I want to start off with item D, which is the operating budget support for our conference center. Many know that I used to work in the hospitality industry. Our conference center has been operating in the black, and it's been very positive. And unfortunately, due to COVID, it's the first time they've actually had to ask for assistance. And it says something about where our economy is. And so I just really want to thank my colleagues who continue to support our hospitality industry, one that is going to be incredibly challenged when it comes to rebounding. And so we had already secured some money to help with marketing our community as we come back and recover from the pandemic. But this is a way to make sure that we keep entities like this afloat. And keep in mind, this isn't just putting money in the pocket of the conference center. This is actually putting money in the pockets of people who have been laid off, people who've lost their jobs, hardworking people who are working in kitchens and working as bell staff, and folks who are working in cleaning the rooms. These are all folks who are employed, who now aren't gainfully employed any longer because we've had to shut them down. So incredibly important, and I just really want to thank folks for their continued support for the industry. Councilmember Albornoz and I, thank you, Mr. Chair. When we talked on the phone and said we've got to do something around the mental health of our kids, we had heard too much of it, and I really want to thank all of my colleagues, both on the HHS committee and the Education and Culture Committee, and then all of my colleagues in general who continue to stand up this conversation around mental health and understanding how important it is for our children especially. And I'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to Councilmember Glass's bill later on today, but certainly one in which we need to make sure we're doing all we can. Our kids are already faced with enough as it is that they're struggling with, and then to have to try and deal with this pandemic and the continued realization that they're not going to be in school for almost a year. I keep saying this because I want to remind folks of this. The last time children stepped foot in a classroom was in March, and it will be until at least January before they step foot in another classroom again here in Montgomery County. That's a lot. That weighs heavily on a lot of kids, and so we certainly need to be mindful of that. Just very quickly, one of the OLO reports dealing with COVID-19 and mental health helps to stand that up as well. And so I really want to thank OLO for their quick work in terms of spotlighting and doing a lot of research papers to help guide us in this pandemic around things that we can work quickly to react to. Of course, sitting in Annapolis for 4 years, along with Councilmember Hucker, certainly the Maryland, My Maryland state song, we're very happy that we're seeing that disappear. It always gave pause to folks, and it's amazing the process in which something actually becomes a state song, a state flower, a state cake, all those kinds of things. And I have my own personal stories about some of those. So certainly I'm very happy to see that we're putting forth this resolution to move forward. And then just certainly last but definitely not least, when it comes to the introduction of our Department of Recreation Youth Sports Initiative, again, want to thank Councilmember Albornoz. We had a conversation about this and about youth activities, especially in light of, and we had a conversation about this last night, here in Germantown, we've had the triple shooting that just happened a few days ago. And so it really is one in which we need to make sure in all of our communities we're providing safe activities for our kids to get engaged in. We know that unfortunately if we don't have those structured programs in our neighborhoods, in our communities, especially in our communities of color, unfortunately people will sometimes get into trouble. And it's not the good trouble like John Lewis asked us to get into. It's some of the bad trouble. And so from that perspective, we've got to help stand up these community organizations who we know are trying to do their part to not only provide an activity for kids, but also mentor them as well. So to my good friend Joe Hooks and 480 Club and others out there like him who continue to try and make sure that we're teaching our kids about growing up and how to do it right, how to also participate in a great activity, utilize that pent-up energy that you have and use it for positive. That's what this is about. And so I just really don't want to glaze over items Q and R or item R and S because they really are something that is a game changer for us in our community. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thanks, Mr. President. I've said this before, but I really do have to press my button more quickly, and it's always challenging because you never know where you are in the queue, so you always have to be on your toes. But I so appreciate all of the comments of all of my colleagues. I do want to begin with item P. It is a public health imperative. A public health imperative that people remain in their homes right now, especially in the midst of the pandemic. We are seeing the numbers rage in a number of states across the country, and we are starting to see a tick up here in our state. And we'd be naive to think that we are not going to see another rise in cases here in our community. And so it is critically important that people have the ability to remain in their homes, to have some degree of predictability as we contain the virus. It also will help us to extend, because we are all hoping, expecting another tranche of funding from the federal government, which will put us in a better position as a local community to further provide assistance to renters and help buffer the transition, which will inevitably come. It's going to be just as painful in January as it is now, and in January come in the midst of the coldest month of the year. And so we have to, as a community, be able to prepare, and that will buy us more time to be able to do so. So it's critically important that the governor take this action, and I appreciate Councilmember Jawando initiating the language on this resolution and the support of all of my colleagues on this. Next, I want to highlight item E. And we did have an excellent and important discussion in the Joint Education and Culture and HHS Committee. So appreciate all my colleagues on both committees and all of my colleagues who have focused on this. I've lost a lot of sleep. I know all of you have too, thinking about the impact on our children and on our children across our entire region. And it's difficult to process what they are going through right now. This is unprecedented. And this $250,000 is important because it works on addressing the needs of some Title I schools that lack the infrastructure even before COVID to support the needs. And I appreciate the statistic that Councilmember Glass mentioned, who are being disproportionately impacted from a mental health standpoint because they're also worried about the economic recovery and how that's impacting their families. But this, as we all know, and again, fingers crossed that we get more federal funding, has to be among the higher priorities in terms of potential funding moving forward. We have to be able to support MCPS and the social and emotional well-being of our students, and I know all of my colleagues join me in sharing that thought. And then last two items, item Q, I do really want to express my appreciation to Councilmember Navarro as the chair of our GO committee and Councilmember Reamer and all of my colleagues on their work on education and the early childhood education initiatives that the council has initiated previously and now. And in particular, I want to highlight MMF for their collaborative approach in bringing in the private sector into a discussion that critically requires their voice and that they be at the table in a very authentic and meaningful way. And this analysis will help us get to the final phase of this particular part of this initiative. And it's been such an honor to work with all of you on it. And again, want to express my appreciation, in particular, Councilmember Navarro, who's been working to shepherd this for a number of years now. And I really want to express that appreciation. And finally, youth sports played a huge role in my development. There's no question about it. I've shared with you guys before. My dad put a poster of Pele in my crib. So sports has always been a big part of my life. Helped give me confidence, helped teach me the value of teamwork, helped focus on mental health and wellness. And as we will learn tomorrow in a triple committee session that we will be joined by Council President Katz, there are sports deserts here in Montgomery County. And we talk about racial equity. There is not equity in terms of youth sports participation here in Montgomery County. And the numbers are alarming and have been exacerbated by COVID. Worse yet, the handful of organizations that were providing services in those sports deserts are struggling significantly financially and are at risk of failure. And without support, will fail. And so the few opportunities that existed won't be there as we return to normal. And so this funding is important to stand up those organizations, support them, but also an important down payment to initiate more activity within those communities. So look forward to ongoing conversations tomorrow on that issue, and so appreciate Councilmember Rice and his collaboration on that as well. I yield back to you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice had one more point, please.
Just very quickly, on item E, I just wanted to stress that the Education and Culture and Health and Human Services Committee amended that appropriation that was introduced. It actually was supposed to go to Montgomery County Public Schools, but we actually wanted it to go to the Department of Health and Human Services because they had existing programs that they could expand in working in conjunction with MCPS to make sure that we could stand them up immediately. So again, something where we didn't want to delay in terms of timing, wanted to make sure that we would be able to serve our students right away and get that immediate service. So I just wanted to highlight that because that is a change from how the appropriation was originally introduced, and want to thank Health and Human Services for committing to work with MCPS on those priorities.
Thank you. And I, too, want to associate myself with all my colleagues' statements. Obviously, they've gone through the list pretty convincingly. But I also wanted to mention that I was extremely pleased to collaborate with Councilmember Glass's office to draft the resolution on the as well on item K. And then also on item, and of course I was talking about the Maryland State song. And on item L, the action, which is a special appropriation for $2,025,000 for short-term assistance to distressed, affordable, common ownership communities if they're COVID related. I wanted to specifically thank my colleagues, and I also wanted to thank Delegate Bonnie Collison, who brought the matter to my attention originally. And then we worked with the community, and we had a work group and all associated with it. So it's very needed. And Councilmember Glass, did you have something in addition, or no? No, okay. And so I did want to specifically thank Delegate Collison for her work on this and many other items. And with that, Madam Clerk, I understand you're here but by phone now, and that you have a listing of petitions. That could be correct or might not be correct, please.
No, that's correct. Can you hear me now?
I can like an ad, yes.
Excellent, okay. So I just wanted to announce a couple of petitions. Petition from residents of Montgomery County supporting zoning text amendment 20-01, solar collection system AR zone standards, and another petition from residents of Montgomery County opposing zoning text amendment 20-01, solar collection system AR zone standards. That is all, Council President.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have a motion by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Glass, to approve our consent calendar. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is a discussion on the Ethics Commission receipt of a proposed to cure. And Ms. Michelson, are you going to lead that off with us? Who's going to lead that off?
Yes, I will. I'll give a brief introduction, and then I'll turn it over to the Ethics Commission Chair and Executive Director. And as the Council is aware, the Ethics Commission received some complaints about the Chief Administrative Officer, Andrew Klein, and they asked the Inspector General to conduct an investigation. And that resulted in the proposal to cure that we'll be hearing about shortly. I want to remind the Council that the Ethics Commission is an independent organization, so the Council has no role in making decisions, nor can it overturn the decisions of the Ethics Commission, and nonetheless, it is important in your oversight role for you to understand critical issues that come before them, especially when it involves someone at a senior level. So I will turn it over to the Executive Director and the Chair to present some key information, and once they have completed their presentation, we'll circle back just to tell you some of my recommendations related to training. So with that, I will turn it over to the Chair and the Executive Director.
Thank you.
So this is Robert Cobb, and the chair of the commission is going to speak first. That's Rahul Gale, and starting my video, which I was unable to do until just now. So Rahul, do you want to begin?
Thank you, Moose. Hello, my name is Rahul Goyal, and I've been the chair to the Montgomery County Ethics Commission for the last 1.5 years. I want to thank the County Council for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Commission. I would like to begin with some personal background. I'm a lifelong Marylander and a Montgomery County resident for nearly 20 years. I'm married with children, one of whom is beginning kindergarten in the Montgomery County Public School System in a little over a month. I'm a second-generation American citizen. My father immigrated to the United States, specifically Maryland, in 1972 to begin his master's program here in the D.C. area. My mother followed soon after their marriage in 1976. Together they started a wholesale jewelry business in 1979 and opened their showroom in downtown Silver Spring in 1982. Today I run that business in partnership with my mother, having celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, still based in downtown Silver Spring. I've been a member of the Ethics Commission for 4 years now. The Commission is made up of longtime Montgomery County residents who continually volunteer their personal time and attention to matters covered in the county ethics law. Vice Chair Susan Beard, Kenita Barrow, Stephen Rosen, and Bruce Romer bring their vast knowledge and experience in both the private and public sectors to every issue. The principled perspectives in addressing the business of the Ethics Commission has been demonstrated time and again, including in the matter I'm here before you to address. We are all appointed by the County Executive and confirmed by the County Council. The Montgomery County Ethics Commission has a long-standing and important role in ensuring the public's trust in its county government. It was created close to 40 years ago per the county charter because, and I quote, each public employee owes a fiduciary responsibility to the county. The charter requires a code of ethics to govern conflicts of interest and misuse of position, among many other things. The county ethics law notes that the confidence and trust of the people erodes when the conduct of county business is subject to improper influence. Among the authorities laid out for the Commission is the mandate to enforce the county ethics law and take all actions necessary to carry out the purposes of the law. This allows us to fulfill the expectations of county residents to have confidence in their local government, as noted earlier. Before I go any further, though, I want to briefly address what our county ethics law is and is not. The law is a set of standards which seek to protect county actions from improper influence or the appearance of improper influence. It is there to ensure that public officials are impartial and employ independent judgment. But it is not a measure of what is good or bad in relation to moral duty and obligations. I point this out for context. A violation of the county ethics law does not make a person unethical, though it may reflect on a county employee's commitment to fulfill the county's larger ethical mission to perform in the best interests of county residents. I truly appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today and represent the Ethics Commission as its chair. Having this opportunity to speak directly to the Council, I would be remiss if I did not make one suggestion. There needs to be a system of assurance that all employees have received ethics training, especially elected officials and their senior staff. Currently, there is a brief ethics training conducted as new employee orientation sessions. There's also a program for 1-hour ethics training to executive branch financial disclosure filers, pursuant to the authority of the Chief Administrative Officer. But there is no statutory ethics training requirement. The Commission would like to work with the Council in establishing appropriate statutory requirements for ethics training. In particular, we believe that elected officials and their senior personnel should be required by the ethics law to take ethics training within weeks of taking office for a position. They are by far the most visible members of our local government. This is a common sense measure that will give county employees needed information about their responsibilities and county residents greater confidence in their local government. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your dedication to Montgomery County, and thank you for your suggestion. I have not heard from my colleagues yet, but my guess is that we will all be in agreement that we look forward to working with you when you're on the suggestion of the training. Mr. Cobb, did you have anything in addition to add?
Yes, I do. Again, my name, thank you for this opportunity this morning to address the Council. My name's Robert Cobb. I'm the Staff Director and Chief Counsel of the Commission. I'll discuss the Commission's processes for handling complaints and allegations, the process used concerning allegations involving Andrew Klein, and I'll summarize the contents of the proposal of cure submitted by Mr. Klein to the Ethics Commission. So, permit me, I'm going to go into some detail here. The structure of the ethics law regulations concerning complaints and allegations provide that the Commission may conduct investigations. The Commission may conduct an investigation on its own initiative if it finds in writing that an investigation is necessary to resolve a matter. Or if a person files a complaint under oath alleging a violation of the ethics law, the Commission may begin an investigation. Commission investigations may be conducted by Commission staff, the county attorney, or a special counsel, or another person temporarily retained to conduct the investigation. The Commission may retain legal services outside the county attorney's office if the Commission finds it necessary to do so, and the county council approves the decision and appropriates sufficient funds to cover the cost of the services. The ethics law provides that a public employee decision maker, in this case the Ethics Commission, and any person who advises a decision maker must not conduct an independent investigation of any fact related to a matter that must be decided on the basis of a record. The Commission may also ask the Inspector General to conduct an investigation and report the finding confidentially to the Commission. There are a number of powers that accrue to the person conducting a Commission investigation, including, for example, the power to compel testimony and records. The investigator must give the Commission a confidential written report of the investigator's factual findings, the sources of information, and the identities of each person providing information. The identity of any person who supplies information to an investigator and the report of the investigator must be kept confidential except as provided in the law. Based on a complaint and an investigative report, if any, the Commission finds reasonable cause to believe a violation of the ethics laws occurred, the Commission must hold an adjudicatory hearing. Although, once that's done, a matter can be resolved through a consent order. So ethics regulations approved by the County Council on July 24th, 2018, and issued pursuant to the Commission, pursuant to Method 2, set forth some additional provisions regarding handling of enforcement matters. The regulations provide for the Commission staff to conduct preliminary inquiries to determine whether a matter merits being presented to the Commission for its consideration. Commission staff can elevate a non-compliance issue to the Commission for consideration of whether a matter warrants investigation. And any time before the Ethics Commission files a complaint or sets a matter for hearing, the Commission staff can ask the person responsible for the possible violation whether he or she would like to propose a cure to the Commission to remedy the possible violation. Any proposal to cure must recite stipulations of fact and law, and any actions taken or agreed to be taken. The Commission may accept or reject a proposal independent of staff's recommendation. And then upon satisfaction of the terms of the accepted proposal, the Commission staff will close the matter. Any accepted proposal acknowledging a violation of the ethics law will be made public. So that's an outline of the statutory and regulatory provisions. Now I'd like to talk about the process used concerning the allegations involving Andrew Klein. On July 29, 2019, a communication received by Commission staff raising ethics issues about Andrew Klein's activities. A week or so later, the communication was received again by Commission staff from a different source raising additional ethics issues about Mr. Klein's activities. I note that neither of these communications constituted a formal complaint under the ethics law. On August 8, 2019, I contacted Mr. Klein with questions related to his outside employment approval. On April 25, 2019, so a few months prior, Mr. Klein had submitted a request for outside employment through the Commission's online outside employment system to consult with public sector organizations on budgeting, performance management, and strategic planning, and to promote his book, City on the Line. The Commission approved the request on June 6, 2019, subject to a condition that Mr. Klein could not engage in consulting activity with organizations that do business with, seek action, or seek to influence Montgomery County. The questions that were directed to Mr. Klein about the outside employment approval on August 8 were specifically related to whether the Commission was fully informed when it made its decision to approve Mr. Klein's outside employment request. In response to the questions that had been posed by Commission staff, Mr. Klein provided information about his book and his relationships with 2 county contractors. Information was presented to the Ethics Commission at a confidential meeting on August 30, 2019, and the Commission authorized staff to prepare a confidential written finding that an investigation is necessary to resolve a matter. This document was finalized on September 4, 2019, and was presented along with a request to the Montgomery County Inspector General to investigate the matter. The Inspector General agreed to investigate the matter on September 6, 2019, and the Inspector General completed its investigation on December 12, 2019. As an aside, the Commission very much appreciates the work done for the Commission by the Inspector General in this matter. Not only was the work excellent, but it spared the Commission from having to seek an appropriation from the County Council to hire an outside investigator, which it would have had to do otherwise. Pursuant to the regulatory process already outlined, I communicated with counsel to Mr. Klein regarding whether Mr. Klein would like to propose a cure. The cure document is the result of the discussions between counsel for Mr. Klein and Commission staff. The Commission accepted the proposal to cure submitted by Andrew Klein on July 1, 2020. In light of the cure being agreed upon, the Commission did not need to have to consider whether it needed to seek approval and appropriation from the County Council to hire outside counsel to draft and file a formal complaint and, if necessary, to prosecute the matter in a full-blown quasi-judicial proceeding. With that, I'd like to briefly summarize the contents of the proposal to cure. The proposal to cure document is 6 1/2 pages with a 25-page attachment, which is the redacted form of the investigative report prepared by the Inspector General. The cure document describes stipulations of law and fact and describes relationships with 2 companies that became contractors of the county, Balancing Act and Clear Impact. The document discusses promotional book activities of Mr. Klein and discusses actions Mr. Klein has taken and is to take. In the CURE document, Mr. Klein stipulated that the bulleted facts of the OIG report of investigation were true. After outlining relevant legal provisions of the ethics law and the process leading up to the proposal, the document provides a brief explanation of what occurred. In essence, Mr. Klein established relationships with the two contractors while working for Baltimore City. After leaving Baltimore City, Mr. Klein established a consulting business. He wrote a book about the budget experience in Baltimore City and entered into arrangements with the two companies. Mr. Klein believed that it was, to a substantial degree, his vision for a strategic approach to achieving outcomes that resulted in his association with Mr. Elrich, the campaign for Mr. Elrich to be the county executive, the transition, and Mr. Klein's subsequent appointment to be chief administrative officer. The document outlines Mr. Klein's role in the county's establishment of contracts with the two entities that he had established relationships with. And the document acknowledges that the book became a useful resource for the implementation of Mr. Klein's vision for budgeting in Montgomery County, resulting in dozens of his book being bought by the county. The document discusses Mr. Klein's attendance at conferences and meetings where he discussed the book and his strategy for budgeting, and the document acknowledges that in connection with these activities, Mr. Klein did not obtain advice from either the Ethics Commission or the County Attorney's Office regarding the government ethics implications of these activities. While noting that Mr. Klein received no funds from either contractor in connection with the county's contracts with these vendors, Mr. Klein acknowledged that his involvement in matters relating to the engagement by the County of Balancing Act constituted a violation of the conflict of interest provision of the ethics law, and with respect to clear impact, a potential conflict of interest and a potential misuse of the prestige of his office. Mr. Klein acknowledged that signing 20 copies of his book purchased by the Contractor Balancing Act at a conference he was attending in an official capacity mixed his private book promotional activities with his county service, which was a misuse of the prestige of office. Mr. Klein also acknowledged that engaging in activities resulting in earned income through the sales of his books was prohibited without advance outside employment approval from the Ethics Commission. The CURE document outlines several steps to be taken by Mr. Klein to remedy the violations and to establish a framework to avoid conflicts of interest between his personal interests and his county duties going forward. Quite obviously, the document and the 25-page investigative report provide substantially more detail and context. It's important to realize that the CURE document was a proposal from Mr. Klein. During the process pursuant to its generation as commission staff, I communicated what I believe should be included in the document, but the document was Mr. Klein's proposal, which the commission accepted. I note that the redacted form of the investigative report was redacted by me to facilitate the discussions about a CURE proposal, with the redactions intended to preserve the confidentiality of witnesses in accordance with the ethics law. Had the matter developed into a quasi-judicial proceeding before the Ethics Commission, Mr. Klein would have received an unredacted version of the investigative report. Thank you. Those are my comments, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you, Mr. Cobb, for giving us that report and for your extensive background on this topic. Ms. Michelson, did you have something in addition to add?
Yes, as I indicated earlier, it's my suggestion that we have training mandated for all county employees. As council members are well aware, we do ethics training for council members. In fact, we do it twice. Once happens within literally a week or so after you are first elected, and the second time during our initial training that we provide to all council members. And so once it was done by our attorney Bob Drummer, and another time by Robert Cobb, who you just heard from. My concern is that doing it every 4 years doesn't really take into account the fact that we have staff that come and go, and I believe it would be very useful to make sure that, at least at the council level, that all staff can be trained and do something like an annual training available for new people as they join. But I had planned to implement that for the council offices. But as I began to think about it and discuss it with Mr. Cobb, my recommendation now is that this become mandatory for all county employees so that they're well aware of the ethics laws, and when there's a violation, hopefully it helps them avoid violations, but when there is one, they understand the rules enough and they know what their path should be to report those violations.
Thank you, and I agree with your suggestion as well. Let me ask the chair and Mr. Cobb or Mr. Cobb, during your investigation of this situation or any other situation, are there additions or suggestions that you have that we should be looking at, legislative suggestions that you have that we should be looking at to enhance, change something that we're doing? Did you feel that you were able to do what was necessary to do during any of those discussions?
I'll take that question. I appreciate the fact that the council passed or approved our regulations that went into effect because in July of 2018, because those regulations really, I think, facilitated the manner in which this was dealt with. So I think that was a real positive. I think from a process standpoint, there probably could be some tinkering with the ethics law. I think probably the larger point is that in addition to the training issues, there's some other items where the ethics law should be considered for improvement. It's more general and not specific to the processes associated with this investigation.
Thank you, and I'm assuming that you will not be shy and that you will certainly give us those suggestions.
That is correct.
Very good. And I see the chairman smiling. I have a feeling he's not shy either. That's good. Thank you. And did you have anything else to add, Mr. Chairman?
No, I believe Mr. Cobb has everything.
Very good. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to have this particular item on the agenda. As chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, the Ethics Commission falls under my jurisdiction of that committee, and obviously it was important to have this item before us. I want to say that we have worked, as Mr. Cobb has just mentioned, have worked hard on some of the updates to the ethics law, and really appreciate, Mr. Gold, your willingness to serve, and really we are very fortunate to have people like you serving on this commission. Let me first talk a little bit about the issue of training. As Ms. Michelson knows, I had reached out a number of months ago because actually there was a county council employee who had asked me about the issue of training and how often, et cetera, because she felt that in Congress this is something that is done regularly, and it is important to remind all of us and refresh our memories in terms of how this needs to happen. And so I think it is wise to respond to that. And as I had mentioned to Ms. Michelson when I requested this session, we should think about what it is, what are some of the things that would enhance this process in general. But I will admit that I think, this is a larger issue, and I don't think we should be shying away from what's in front of us here, because we are the oversight body. And my main concern now has to do with training is important, but how would that have avoided the situation? It's one thing for an employee to have done something like this, but when it's the chief administrative officer, then it raises for me some concerns, because the employees, the county government employees, obviously, are under the chief administrative officer. And it is very difficult with a straight face to say to our employees, well, you're going to have to go to mandatory training when the chief administrative officer himself didn't seem to understand the basics of ethics and conflicts of interest. And so, this is a very delicate issue. And I know there's a cure, and I understand that. But as chair of this committee, I I think that it is very important for all of us as the oversight body to grapple with this notion of how it is that the actual chief administrative officer did not even understand the basics of conflict of interest and issues of the ethics law. That is a concern to me. And, you know, I have great appreciation for Mr. Klein's expertise and, you know, what he has brought in terms of, you know, his book and all of that. But I was elected, obviously, and, you know, every year we get these, interviews by the audit firm, et cetera, and we're always, you know, very good at filling out our financial disclosures, and there's just a lot that goes on. And Montgomery County is known for being a place where these issues are rare. I personally still have some concerns regarding the ability of Mr. Klein to be the chief administrative officer of our county government when there was such a lapse in judgment regarding something like this. And I understand that the county council does not have any jurisdiction because obviously we're not the ones who get to hire and we're not the ones who make this personnel decisions, and we are not the ones who can make any changes regarding what the ethics commission has put forth in terms of a cure. But I do want to be on record saying that I have those concerns, and I don't know how we can, with a straight face, tell our employees that, hey, now you have mandatory training on this, but if something like that does happen, the cure is $5,000 and then you're good to go. That's a problem. And again, when I requested this, I know there were some concerns about, the item. I just want to make sure that the public understands that as the oversight body, we are responsible for understanding how can we best protect the integrity of county government and also how our taxpayers' dollars be protected, which is why it was important to have this public discussion. And I welcome Mr. Cobb. I will work with you and Ms. Michelson on any other kinds of areas that can strengthen the law. But again, I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding how any of that would have prevented this type of lapse in judgment, and how our employees now can kind of, the morale issue, et cetera. It's something that it's real, and I don't think that we should shy away from saying that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 4 council members on the list who right now want to speak. I just want to remind everyone that Dr. Gales is supposed to be here in 15 minutes. Councilmember Albornoz.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate, let me just begin by expressing my deep appreciation to the Commission for the incredibly important role that you play. I know how seriously you take your jobs, and having worked in county government now for 14 years, I particularly want to thank Mr. Cobb. You are a stalwart leader, sir, and to hold all of us accountable. And so I want to start from that space. I do have several questions with regards to the investigation, and then have comments that, quite frankly, are more directed to the executive branch, not the Commission and not you, Mr. Cobb, because I think the work speaks for itself. It was outstanding, and I agree that the ability to do this without having to hire a consultant not only saved us money, but also helped with the efficiency of this investigation, because this is obviously, as Chairwoman Navarro indicated, a very sensitive situation. And let me also provide a little bit of context and background in expressing my appreciation to Mr. Klein, who did reach out, I believe, to all of the members of the council a couple of days before the release of this investigation to express his regret, to express his embarrassment, to express his apology for having taken the actions that he took that have led to the cure letter. But I didn't read that report until after I spoke to Mr. Klein, and I am deeply troubled by it on a number of different levels. I'm troubled that Mr. Klein was not put on administrative leave during the course of the investigation and continued in his role as the head of procurement for our entire county through this investigation. I'm concerned that the county executive has not reached out to my colleagues and I to express how his administration has taken this matter extraordinarily seriously, how there has been, I believe, a statement from the county executive, but not much more than that in terms of his comments on this particular matter. Because the ripple effect of a situation like this is profound. What do we say to department heads who are also found guilty of similar violations, that you get one strike, you get a pass the first time around, and yes, there is a cure, but the cure for the payment of $5,000 and the retainment of employment is significant in light of what we have seen. And I appreciate those recommendations, and I also appreciate the recommendation of additional training. But the broader question here is trust. And I worked in an executive branch for 12 years and know how important that trust is among colleagues. And I don't believe enough has been done beyond this cure to repair the damage from the messaging that this sends to all of county government, that this sends to people that deal in their business with county government. And I don't think, quite frankly, that this matter has been taken seriously enough by this administration. And that's a concern. So with that background, I had a couple of questions with regards to the investigation. Is this the first time that a sitting CAO, Mr. Cobb, to your knowledge, has been found guilty of an ethics violation in the history of our county?
So I can only speak to the last 9 years that I've been in service and whatever documents that I've come across, but it's the first to my knowledge. Now, I'd say that there wasn't a finding so much as an admission of violations of the ethics law. The commission has the authority at the end of an adjudicatory hearing to make findings of violations. So that didn't happen here. In effect, through the cure document, Mr. Klein admitted to certain violations of the ethics law.
I appreciate that. And was the county executive or other members of his executive branch interviewed in the course of this particular investigation? Did you discover when he was made aware of when these violations occurred, or was he made aware of them only after the report was released?
So in terms of who was interviewed, the investigation was handled by the Inspector General's office, and then was conveyed to the Ethics Commission. My recollection is that there was communications between the Office of Inspector General and the county executives, so that you're aware, the county executive was apprised prior to the final submission by Andrew Klein of the contents of his cure letter as to what the contents of those what the cure letter and the redacted form of the OIG investigation would say. So that was just prior to the finalization of the document that was submitted to the Ethics Commission for review.
So Mr. Klein acknowledged what he felt were violations, and that sort of precipitated the development of the cure letter, and thus not ending the investigation, but not taking it any further once he acknowledged that he had committed those violations.
From the Ethics Commission's perspective, once the cure letter was accepted by the Ethics Commission, the matter was ripe for closure.
Okay. So I think in addition to the training, which clearly we need more of, no question, but to Councilmember Navarro's point, she's spot on, that training would not have prevented this from taking place, in my opinion. Mr. Klein served on the Revenue Authority Board in 2015 and would have received some level of ethics training, having served on that board, and served in a high-level position within the city of Baltimore in an appointed position there, and would have received some type of ethics training while he was there. This should have been known. And so I think that He's acknowledged that privately, but still it sets a precedent that I'm deeply concerned about, and how this impacts county residents. And as we talk about equity, I say this as a Latino. I'm just going to say it. Had this been a minority or a person of color in a position here, would he have been or she have been treated the same? I can't say that for sure, which is a terrible thing to say. But I think there are so many undertones within this issue that demand that this be more taken more seriously by this executive branch and by our county executive. This position is the highest level appointed position in the executive branch. Everything flows from there. And so I just think it's critically important moving forward that this is acknowledged beyond just the cure letter, which addresses this specific issue, but not the context and the broader issue that this creates. And so I yield back to you, Mr. President. And I'll be honest, I don't think this should be the end of this. I think we need a follow-up from the executive branch in responses to how, beyond this one incident, they are addressing this holistically across all of county government, how this is being communicated to other department heads, and how they will handle situations moving forward. If, God forbid, in the event somebody else is found guilty of a violation, at a minimum, they should be put on administrative leave until an investigation is complete. So thank you, Mr. President. I yield back to you.
Thank you. We still have 4 council members that want to speak, and we have 6 minutes before Dr. Gales is supposed to be here. Councilmember Raymer.
Mr. President, I apologize to interrupt. I just wanted to respond one thing to Councilman Alverner's comment. The only reason I'm concerned is, as a minority, and on a commission that is multiple people are minorities, I believe that we would have always have done the same thing, regardless, on the commission side, regardless of race or sex or any of those things. I just want to put that out there. That's important.
I so appreciate that. And again, that comment is not directed at the commission. This comment is directed at the executive branch, and I appreciate those comments. Know the diligence of the commission and how fair and equitable you are across the board. So wanted to state that. I appreciate that comment, sir.
Thank you. Thank you both. Councilmember Raymer.
Well, I would like to just follow up on that point very briefly. I think Mr. Albornoz is actually absolutely correct, and I don't think the assertion is that the Ethics Commission's recommendations are, have taken it easy. I think the issue is that if another employee had done something similar to this within the executive branch, I think we all believe the county executive would have had a different view on it. And I think that gets to kind of the intangible question that I'm really struggling here. First of all, I don't see how training would have made a difference in this case unless perhaps it would have led county employees to alert the Ethics Commission sooner. But we are still waiting to hear from the county executive about it. But my struggle with this is sort of intangible. My bigger problem here is sort of an intangible, which is that this whole incident reinforces a concern that I've had about, and I think many people in the county government have had, about the chief administrator's work. The county executive has allowed him to really apply his personal business theory, his personal business practice, would turn the curve to his management of the county government. County executive has required all of our departments to participate in something that really often feels like a demonstration project for a consulting practice, and often feels like it substitutes jargon for real management and change. And that has been weighing on me for a lot of time. And I think that this report just raises some real questions about, the continuing of the consulting business, and really whether the intended, whether the chief administrator's success is the county's success. And I think that is weighing on a lot of people, the department heads and managers. And I think we do have an issue. We need to restore the confidence of this county government, in the leadership of the executive branch. So I think that is an order that goes beyond, fulfilling the cure. I think the county executive needs to give some thought to how to, get the whole county government back on a good footing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
So I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I'm going to double down exactly on what Councilmember Alvarno said. I'm going to tell you right now that we have employees that are within our ranks who are saying that if they committed the same violation that Mr. Klein did, that they would have been treated differently. I don't know whether that's, and again, that's just their word, whether that's coming from the Ethics Commission or it's coming from the county executive or both. That's what's out there. And so I want folks to understand that that's what we're combating right now. And that's a realism that, especially in light of what we're talking about with equity and justice for all people in our community, is incredibly important. Look, we've seen it. We've seen where white-collar crime is treated differently. The name itself and the moniker itself casts a dispersion of this sort of, it wasn't really that bad and nobody was really hurt by it, so therefore we can just sweep it under the rug kind of mentality, where I know people who have gone to jail who are people of color over similar sorts of things. And so from that perspective, I just say to myself, where are we when it comes to how we do the proposal to cure? Is that something that's granted to everyone who commits an ethics violation? And how many of those are accepted? I'd like to understand that. And so when I think it was Councilmember Albornoz who said he'd like to come back to this issue, I'd like to get some of that information and understand the statistics around what folks were accused of, whether or not they were afforded the right to create a proposal to cure, and then how many of those were accepted and who those people look like. Because I think that's incredibly important. One of the things that I learned in our racial equity and social justice is that even people of color still bear implicit bias. And I learned a lot about myself, and I want to thank Council President Navarro for ensuring that all of us went through that training, because we all bear it. And so I want to see if, based on the numbers we have, and I'm not creating accusations, I just want to see the data. I want to see what the numbers are and see where we are in terms of how many of these we do and what happens. And then lastly, I'll close with what Councilmember Reamer and Councilmember Albornoz said, which is, look, at the end of the day, this falls on the county executive. The county executive wants to continue to have the number 2 person in charge be a person who's committed serious ethics violations. That's a choice he's going to have to justify. That's a choice that he's going to have to stand up and say, this is why he feels as though it's comfortable to have this person still in charge in a leadership position. And let me just be very clear. I appreciate, just as Councilmember Albornoz said, that the CAO reached out to me and had a conversation, but it's kind of odd. I have to say, as I was caught having this conversation with him asking me, do I have any questions, still not having seen the report as well, and just saying, look, I appreciate the fact that you say mea culpa, but at the end of the day, I'm not the judge and jury. Certainly, we have an ethics commission, and we have other folks out there. If there was any criminal intent, it seems clear that there was none from that perspective. But again, at the end of the day, this is a court of public opinion in our community. And is our community aware of what happened, what went down? Are we being honest about and open and forthright about it? And, informing people of what happened and why a decision was made that we feel as though this person should still be in this position. So there's a lot that's still floating out there, so many unanswered questions. And I would like to, Mr. President, ask for that to be a formal request for information regarding the items that I talked about. How many proposals to cure, who the people are who asked for proposals to cure, and how many of those were accepted.
Thank you, and I know that Mr. Cobb and the chairman are here, so they directly have heard your formal request as well. Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Cobb and Mr. Gohl, for your work on this. My colleagues have asked some very pointed questions, and I appreciate I appreciate them doing so. My question is more for you, both of you, and the inner workings of the commission. In reading the report, the tools that the Ethics Commission had might have appeared limited to some, in that you were only able to request funds be returned that had been used by county government in various ways. There were no punitive damages assessed. And so my question for you is, was there anything else that you would have liked to, I'll use the word levy here, with regard to this situation that you did not have the authority to do?
So I'll answer that question. So remember, this proposal to cure was a document that was submitted by Andrew Klein. I suggested things that I thought would be appropriate to include in it, but it's his document. Had the Ethics Commission gone through a proceeding and made findings, an adjudicatory hearing, and made findings, it would have been able to impose remedies that are available to it under the ethics law. Really, the advantages in connection with this enterprise, we were able to bring accountability and transparency without a full-blown trial that would have involved a lot of county resources, both in terms of personal time and money. And so I felt as though the commission was able to make a decision to move forward without all of that. But there are remedies in the ethics law that really were not utilized in connection with this because there was no adjudicatory proceeding by the commission.
I appreciate that insight, and another way to think about this is the CAO's outside business dealings, which could be summarized in other words as outside employment. And I'm curious if you think that is a central factor in this, and whether we should rethink the way that our guidelines or regulations are applied to senior leaders in county government or elected officials.
I think that's an excellent question, and it could apply to county council as well as senior employees. In the federal government, and I also believe that with respect to the county executive, there's something known as an outside earned income bar for certain employees and limitations as to others. And the county could consider that as part of the ethics package.
Okay, well, as the GO committee chair said, this conversation will continue, and so I look forward to being part of that conversation to make sure that every resident in Montgomery County has their faith and trust in our elected and appointed leaders as well. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. I did want to mention that Dr. Gales has graciously allowed us that he has changed his schedule, that he will be on our meeting tomorrow's at 1:30. So he will not give a report. He and we will not have a Board of Health today from Dr. Gales. That will be, someone needs to mute. I don't know. But we will not hear from Dr. Gales today. We will hear from him and Dr. Stoddard and others tomorrow at 1:30 so that this conversation can continue. Thank you, Dr. Gales. We will see you tomorrow. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President, and I appreciate the fact that we are having this conversation, and really do appreciate the Ethics Commission. I appreciate the Office of Inspector General. I did want to note that this council really worked hard in our first year to strengthen the Inspector General's office, and the fact that we were able to have this type of investigation within county resources, within the Ethics Commission and the Office of Inspector General, I think speaks to the impact of that decision and that emphasis and that focus. Public trust is the only currency that we have in public life. It's all we have in terms of our ability to govern. And to me, this speaks directly to public trust. That's why, I share many of the comments of colleagues of how disturbed and disappointed I am by the contents.
Mr. Gould, I think you need to go on mute because you're getting feedback. Thank you. Sorry, Andrew.
No, thank you. Thank you. Why I'm, disturbed and disappointed by the contents of the ethics report, because that's what this speaks to, and it's not a member of the county government. It is not some county employee. It is the top county employee, the person who's in charge of running the government. And, I speak, similarly, the comments that were made about the comments about training. This is not a training issue. Let's not obscure what happened here. This is specifically a clear violation of ethics and of public trust. That's what it is. It is a massive, massive failure of judgment in the highest position in county government. So, I think we can continue to talk about changes we could make, ways that we could strengthen training, ways that we could address our Inspector General and ethics policies, and I am committed and continue to be happy to work on those issues, as I dedicated much of the first year in office to focus on those issues. But that's not what we're talking about here. And if we think that this is a shortcoming of training, I think we have completely downplayed what are the expectations of the highest positions in county government, not least of which the highest position appointed in county government. I'm also concerned, and I understand, when we talk about this as being a cure, it's kind of a euphemism. What this really is, effectively, is a plea agreement. This is, an ethics violation, accusation, and ultimately an agreement being determined. I'm not saying that that is the wrong outcome, but that's ultimately what happened here. And to avoid a prolonged investigation that would have significant costs to the county and require of staff resources, this is what the outcome was determined to be. But I am concerned that the cure might not solve the ailment for county government here, because as Councilmember Glass was noting, essentially we've paid back, we've requested payment back of the funds that were inappropriately spent out of taxpayer dollars, and made a commitment not to commit further ethics violations. And that's a pretty low bar and a pretty low standard for something that we're referring to as a cure. In terms of the punitive damages, I don't think that, as was mentioned before, is a decision for the Ethics Commission or the Inspector General. It's really a decision for the county executive and how he has chosen and continues to choose to move forward. I am concerned, it's not just about the book and the public dollars that were spent on the book, or the fact that there was travel to conferences on taxpayer dime, where the book was being promoted for personal gain, which is clearly part of this. But, you have multiple contracts, really three, $9,980 for a balancing act, at the very time that there was a contractual agreement with the CAO. And then you have a $10,000 non-competitive contract to clear impact, and a $99,000 competitive contract. So this isn't just these small contracts and a relatively small amount of money. It's well over $100,000 in private contracts. So my question for Mr. Cobb is whether there was how much we've looked into the competitive contract and that bidding process, and whether there are any either directly related to this or future issues related to not just the person who has the conflict of interest within county government, but the businesses that are doing business with the county and who they're employing within county government, or who they have contractual agreements with within county government.
Okay, so let me address, take the opportunity to address a few points before getting to your contracts question. And I'm glad that we got an extra few minutes because I think some of these points are important. Several of you have talked about the training and suggested that the training would not be effective. So I agree completely that the issue of training is largely severable from the question of what does this report and what does it amount to. So I agree with you on that. But in terms of the effectiveness of training, I think that training is critically important. One, I think it substantially reduces the likelihood of a violation. And two, and maybe equally important, there's no notion after a person has had the ethics training that I've delivered in a 1-hour session of whether or not they're going to hide behind a notion of an innocent error in connection with an activity. And so to me, the training is critically important, especially with respect to people in the highest positions of power in the county, that they get the ethics training. So that's it. Second, the facts that are presented both in the IG report and in connection with the proposal to cure, I'll admit they're very hard to weigh in terms of what does it mean. And in that context, whether through ethics training, so in the ideal world, there would have been good ethics training right at the very beginning for the senior staff. Mr. Klein would have said, oh, well, dang, I've got this whole thing. And in fact, I think I got hired to implement a vision that incorporates ideas that are in my book and these relationships with contractors. What do I do? And I think that the Ethics Commission, we would have worked something out. I don't think that the county executive would have been precluded from hiring Mr. Klein by virtue of Mr. Klein's prior development of expertise in the area. The problem here was that Mr. Klein didn't come and ask for advice from the county attorney's office or the Ethics Commission in connection with this. And I think that the training, that's something that should have happened, but that the training could have helped trigger that process that would have avoided the entire circumstance. As to Mr. Rice's suggestion, Councilmember Rice's question about the proposal to cure, this is the first and only instance where there's been a proposal to cure that's been presented. Typically, with respect to rank and file abuses of government, whether they're ethics violation or other violations, personnel can be addressed through the routine personnel systems. To me, it's this type of violation that can occur at the highest level of government is exactly why you have an ethics commission and wouldn't rely on routine personnel administration to handle it. The ethics commission really isn't well equipped to conduct an investigation of every type of misconduct by personnel that might implicate the ethics law. Again, this proposal to cure process wasn't approved until July of 2018. So the alternative would have been to start a proceeding and to obtain a consent order, which is something that's been in the statute. There have been no consent orders since I've been with the county since July of 2011. My review of prior Ethics Commission files indicate that there have been consent orders that were entered into, in the 1990s and early 2000s. Not a whole lot, but there are some. With respect to Councilmember Preetson's question about contracts, so the question is what more, I'll rephrase it, what more has been done regarding the consideration of these contracts. And I'd say what you see is what you get in terms of the OIG investigation and the proposal to cure. So beyond what you see there, I'd say nothing has been done regarding these contracts. It's obviously a very difficult circumstance because there's no information that suggests, other than the involvement of the CAO in the development of these contracts, that these contracts aren't fully appropriate and the best possible thing for the administration of county government. We don't have any information to suggest that these aren't appropriate. There are obviously many ways to conduct the types of activities regarding budget management. The county had one in place that was prior to the current administration. I'm not equipped to determine whether or not that system was adequate or whether the new system that was advocated by Mr. Klein is an appropriate substitute. And the OIG investigation did not get into that issue, and the Ethics Commission and the proposal to cure did not address it either.
I appreciate that, Mr. Moose. I do believe personally that not for the Ethics Commission necessarily, and you're confined to the rules and standards and laws that we have, but I do think that the burden of proof in this context from the executive branch is on the executive branch to prove to the public that they are meeting those standards, not to have evidence to suggest otherwise. I think that, as colleagues have mentioned, that's the difference between your role and the executive branch's role. And I do think in light of concerns that have been raised, obvious and clear concerns that have been raised based on judgment and on the potential pressure that those in the executive branch could have felt, making determinations that burden of proof absolutely should fall on the executive branch to demonstrate to the public and to the council proactively that is in fact the case. The last piece, was there any investigation as part of this from either the Ethics Commission or the Office of Inspector General looking at not just the books that were purchased with public dollars that have been repaid? I believe it was 89 books was the approximate number that were paid with county taxpayer money, but all books potentially paid for, using the position either by county employees or otherwise, because there have been a number of reports of county employees, purchasing the book on their own dime, and this is a situation where you have subordinates paying for something that profits the boss because of potential pressure that they felt, which was searing through the entire report, was this question of folks showing up to meetings and feeling like they needed to know what was in the book, and that's why some departments purchase it with taxpayer money, and in other cases it seems books were purchased by individual county employees with their county employee money, which, by the way, their salary is taxpayer money, but it's their choice, obviously, to choose what book they do purchase and don't. But still could be inappropriate, if not a direct violation of ethics law.
So I don't have any data or information related to the question of who else is buying the books that aren't covered by the OIG report. I can give you an impression, and it's a very favorable one, of the methodology of the Inspector General. I'd say this is an extraordinarily complex type of investigation with a lot of different potential avenues, and that the OIG managed to, within a 3-month time, collect what I'd say is the readily available information without turning the county upside down, and provided that so that the Ethics Commission, through its processes, and this ultimately through the proposal to cure that Mr. Klein brought to the table, was able to provide transparency to 98% of what occurred, as far as we know, and to get that on the table so that there can be any kind of accountability associated with the enterprise that the folks who for the county executive or for the county council in its oversight role to conduct. I'd like to make an additional point that had this gone through an administrative hearing and the ethics commission, maybe it would have had some tools to administer additional punishment after debate within the commission. It's very speculative to try to figure out whether it would have said 10,000 or what a number would have been. I don't know. Extremely speculative. But the notion that something that we'd be in a different place that than where we've ended up through this proposal to cure. We've got transparency to the OIG investigation. We have admissions of violations of the ethics law. The commission at most would have debated, had it made findings of violations, it would have debated whether or not it should recommend a dismissal. That's one of the remedies that could have been used. And I'd say it's extremely speculative to think that the commission would have been in a position or felt as though a recommendation of dismissal was appropriate. I hearken back to Mr. Goyle's opening remarks, where there's ethics is one thing, but the Ethics Commission is really not in a position in a circumstance like this one to evaluate an individual's overall contribution to county governance, and the county executive is in the best position to do that.
I think we all agree with you on that point that you've done your job in this capacity. The Inspector General supported the Ethics Commission in this capacity. That ultimately, a lot of these questions are really more directed to the county executive. I'll just close because there was a similar issue in county government when I was young in Montgomery County and followed this pretty closely with Chief Moose in a book situation. And I'll just quote the ethics ruling because I pulled it up. And one of the comments as part of that ethics ruling that ultimately led to the departure of Chief Moose, who was a highly regarded, well-respected hero in Montgomery County government, but quote, "It is not in the best interest of the county to allow its employees to trade on their government activities for private gain in such a direct and immediate fashion," end quote. And that was related to a book that directly tied to his work within county government. With that, I'll yield back, Mr. President. Thank you again for all of your work, all the Ethics Commission's work, the Inspector General's work. I think transparency and accountability is important. You've brought out into light the transparency aspect, and I think we still have some work to do on the accountability part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad that I requested this session because I've learned a lot, and I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Councilmember Friedson just brought up this important point regarding Chief Moose, and when you read the articles about it, it is so similar to the situation with a completely different outcome. So again, this is an important conversation for us because as the oversight body, it sends a very strong message to our employees, what it is that we need to do and how it is that we need to proceed. I very much appreciate the work of the commission. I agree with my colleagues that ultimately this is for the executive to address. I will say that I had requested to have Ms. Lemarzi, the OIG, here because I think there are other issues regarding, for example, procurement and things of that nature that perhaps she could have given us some, just her thoughts on some other places that we should go. It's my understanding that Mr. Cobb felt, or I think the commission felt that it wasn't appropriate for her to be here, but I still think that we need to do that. I guess what I will say is that I would like for us to work, Mr. President, with Ms. Michelson, et cetera, and my colleagues to have a follow-up session around this because there are a lot of different layers. And, I have heard the issue of training. I'll be honest, I've also heard from employees who say, it's not fair to just offer training and think that this should take care of everything. I think that having this discussion was important because not a lot of people really appreciated exactly what happened in this instance. People remember very far in between examples, not just Chief Moose, but there were other examples. I think Mr. Pardeep Ganguly is one of them, where it was a much, smaller amount of money in question, and somebody who was not at that high level, who actually, was let go. And so there's just a lot of things here to consider. And I think that especially under the circumstances that we are living through right now with the pandemic and with everything else, it is so, so important that our employees and the public know that, the persons who are at the helm of the administration are, there are people that of the highest standards, and that our employees also hold at very high standards. So I hope that we can all work together for follow-up to this issue in terms of what the council can address. Ultimately, as has been said, it is up to the executive to put forth any additional statements and or address the concerns of the county employees that he oversees. Thank you.
Thank you. And as was previously mentioned, when we get the additional information from the Ethics Commission and Mr. Cobb, we certainly will have a follow-up discussion on this item. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Mr. Cobb and Mr. Goyle, for your service and your work. The question I had, you started to go into it a little bit, Mr. Cobb. The question I have of you and for Mr. Goyle, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, correct me. Okay, I'm doing okay. Is so obviously the proposal to cure that was accepted, there was some, I'm assuming there was some analysis or commission discussion that they thought that this was a appropriate remedy to this situation. And if I'm incorrect about that, you can correct me. But assuming that's the case, explain to me why you thought that it was. And you mentioned, Mr. Cobb, that one of the tools at your disposal, if there was an administrative hearing, would be to recommend other potential remedies. Just go on mute for one more second, Mr. Gold, until I'm done. I think you just have the feedback. That's all right. And so I just want to know, one, was there discussion about the proposal by Mr. Klein? And if so, if you could characterize why you thought that was sufficient, and just talk about that a little bit, please.
So I'll address, and Mr. Goyle can correct me to the extent that I overstate. Again, I'm the attorney for the Ethics Commission. I'm not a member of the Ethics Commission.
Right.
So when I give you my thoughts on what the Commission was thinking, I could be a little bit out of bounds. I think that the Commission weighing, so on the one side, it's weighing what's involved in a full-blown adjudicative proceeding pursuant to which there's full due process rights, motions, legal arguments, etc. Weighs that in determining against, not to mention having to come to county council, ask for money to go out and hire an attorney to file a complaint and then prosecute the matter. So I'm not sure whether the number we would have been asking for is 50,000 or 100,000, but it would have been a significant number. And so weighing that against what you get when this proposal to cure is put forth, where you get instant accountability or instant transparency. Whatever the problem that was addressed stops, so the bleeding stops on whatever the violations apparently were, and that the commission weighs those things in consideration of really what's the best way to go. Not to mention, in connection with an adjudicative proceeding, the people that presumably would be witnesses in connection with that adjudicative proceeding would be people that worked for Mr. Klein. And that creates a certain level of awkwardness in connection with the enterprise. And you really, once you get into an adjudicative proceeding, you really don't know where you're going to end up.
Right.
I had many conversations with counsel for Mr. Klein. There were a number of notions and defenses that he would have asserted with respect to these things, and you just don't know where you're going to end up at the end. So it's really, this is something that the commission was presented with, and it had the choice of accepting it or not accepting it, and it elected to accept it.
Right. And I want to go to you, Mr. Goebel. Just to paraphrase what I heard you say is that there was a cost-benefit analysis of what you were trying to achieve here, and you said you had admission, you had the facts getting out there, you had the inappropriate action ceasing to exist. One thing I didn't hear, and maybe Mr. Goebel can chime in, was the severity or level of the offense, and if that factored in as far as whether, obviously, public trust and abuse of office potentially, but also the amount of financial gain or lack thereof that was involved in this offense. So maybe Mr. Goebel could talk about that as well. Goebel, excuse me.
No, thank you. Just to first reiterate what Mr. Cobb said, we did get a full we got full admission of violations with no ambiguity. That was the first thing, and it's a public document. You know, it's not that he did this in private and it's not out there. It's publicly posted on the Ethics Commission page. Beyond that, he was cut off from all ties going forward. That was another thing. The financial proposal that he gave us there was a discussion. It is not the Ethics Commission's responsibility. Take that word back. It is not our ability to remove someone or to do something beyond that. We work within our limits based on the ethics law. And so that was the discussion. What is appropriate for what the ethics law allows us to do and what is in best interest for the county?
So let me just ask directly. I mean, do you personally, as chair of the commission, think that this was an appropriate remedy and that there doesn't need to be additional, and again, realizing it's not your role to met out any additional accountability, do you personally think it was an appropriate remedy?
For the commission, yes.
But not necessarily in general.
I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I respect that. I'm just trying to get to the level of severity. Was the amount of money involved something that was considered in accepting the cure submitted by Mr. Klein? Was that discussed? For example, when you read the report and in the conversations I had, he didn't make, in relative terms, there wasn't a lot of money made off of this. I don't think it was a grand scheme to enrich himself. I think he made a bad choice, in my view. I'll tell you my view of it. And it was not the right thing. Did that factor into the commission's willingness to accept the cure?
I believe that the money that was given covers all the expenses, I believe, of the county, or almost all the expenses of the county. He did go to a conference, and he still did do other county work, but he also reimbursed that money as well. So I believe the cure proposal was appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's fine, and thank you again for your work, both of you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice.
So this gets more and more interesting. My lead-ins were because I know, I've been living here in the county for a very long time, and I've been elected in this county for a very long time as well. And so I followed a lot of these stories that happened. And so I know the Chief Moose incident. I remember exactly when it happened. I remembered following it because I thought it was kind of odd because of some of the other stuff that my family dealt with. And we actually dealt with Chief Moose. I know him personally very well. And so it is interesting that we have two people of color, prime examples, coming before the Ethics Commission in different outcomes than what we see in this case. I'll just leave that there. What troubles me, Mr. Cobb, is you said something that stuck out to me when you responded to my inquiry, saying that this was something that was proposed by Mr. Klein, and this is the first time in which that's happened. And I'm curious as to who told Mr. Klein that he could actually do something like that. Was that communicated by the Ethics Commission, or was that something that his attorneys just pitched to you and you just accepted? I mean, if it's never happened before, how did he know that that was remedy?
So the regulations that were approved by the County Council on July 25th, 2018, specifically outline, and it's in the first page of the proposal to cure document, where it's actually on the second page, the third paragraph. So the regulations themselves specifically outline this as a possible process. And the reason for doing this is that the alternative is that you have to go through, in a matter like this, an adjudicatory process and all of its cost and all of its harm. So the whole idea of the creation of this regulatory provision was for a case exactly like this one, where give the commission an opportunity to get a matter resolved, where it's not this, you don't get to the exact same place you get to at the end of an adjudicatory hearing, where the commission has the authority to make findings against somebody and then dictate, in effect, what its opinion looks like that's made public and dictate what the remedies are. And as Mr. Goyle has pointed out, one of the remedies that the commission doesn't have is a decision to hire or fire an employee. It could make a recommendation that somebody be fired. That's it at most. So this proposal to cure, yes, I communicated to counsel for Mr. Klein that the regulatory provision is there, and the commission's willing to entertain a proposal if they want to make one.
So you did that before Mr. Klein and his counsel had actually sought out from you that may be a potential opportunity. Is that correct? That's what it sounds to me like you just said. I just want to be very clear.
Yeah, I'm not 100% confident it was me that picked up the phone because this was several months ago, but I believe that to be the case.
Okay, so again, Mr. President, I'd actually like to ask for a closed session at this point. There are a number of legal issues that I'm concerned about when it comes to how it is that we have treatment when you have line-level employees who get standard disciplinary procedure. We've already just had that stated in public. And then we have now the potential of us communicating to a high-level employee that there's an option for them to take when it comes to disciplinary procedure. That really concerns me. And so I'm not going to say any more. I think that we need to take this to a closed session.
Thank you. And of course, we would need some background information on any closed session that we have as well.
I can respond in part, and I'm not entirely clear what.
Mr. President, I would seriously ask that we not discuss this any further because we could open ourselves up for potential. I really think, and I would urge us to go into closed session if we were to have any more conversations about potential discrepancy of treatment of employees in different procedures. At this point, I would really urge us to be very careful in how we tread forward.
I appreciate that. Mr. Cobb, did you want to comment? Or?
Yes, I do. It's not for me to say that whether a political appointee is hired or fired is a question for the people who are making the appointment or the decision to remove that employee ultimately, and it's not even contained within the merit system. So I think that that's all I wanted to say on that topic.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first obviously thank Mr. Goyle and the entire Ethics Commission and the Inspector General for all your hard work on this investigation, and echo what Councilmember Albernow said. I really want to thank you, Mr. Cobb, for all your guidance and service for so many years. I agree with many of the concerns my colleagues have expressed, and I don't want to belabor it, but I don't want to lose one key point made by you, Mr. Cobb. You mentioned, and it's in the, I think, 4th paragraph on page 5, at no time prior to August 2019 did Mr. Klein seek advice from County Attorney or the Ethics Commission concerning the government ethics implications associated with his relationships with the two entities or the implications of implementing in Montgomery County a budget strategy that espoused the strategies explained in his book. That to me is maybe the most shocking part. And then you go on to say, notably, I mean, because Mr. Klein isn't new to government, as has been said. He's been through trainings. I think anybody who is a new employee who had never been through an ethics training might have the judgment to just ask, hey, these are some of my prior relationships. What's allowed, what's not allowed. But Mr. Klein didn't do that for some reason. And you said, notably, no one else in county government brought these matters to the attention of the Ethics Commission until late July 2019. So did in your interviews, Mr. Cobb and Mr. Goyle, did Mr. Klein ever say why he declined to bring these relationships to your attention?
So I'll answer that. Again, two points of clarification. One, the proposal to cure document that you're reading from is Mr. Klein's document, not the Ethics Commission's. The Ethics Commission agreed to it. Again, it was a product of discussions between myself and counsel for Mr. Klein. And the second point was the Ethics Commission, it is the Ethics Commission's investigation, but the investigation was conducted by the Office of Inspector General. So it didn't have the Ethics Commission has no knowledge of the answer to your question regarding why Mr. Klein did or did not receive the ethics advice.
Thank you. I can ask the Inspector General, but to your knowledge, you're not aware why this didn't ever come out. He never offered up why this didn't. He didn't seek advice.
I have no knowledge about that.
And then, the proposal uses the term notably. I mean, you all accepted. Why is it? He was the chair of the transition team. Why is it notable? And it's an unusual circumstance. Who else would you have expected to bring this to the attention of the Ethics Commission?
Well, I can speculate from my perspective. There's a lot of people in the county who were buying the book in connection with this, and I would have thought that somebody would have picked up the phone and said, it's awful funny. Seems like there's a lot of encouragement to buy this book, City on the Line, and it's written by the Chief Administrative Officer. Is that ethical? And it surprises me that we didn't hear about it until late July of 2019.
Mr. Goyle, anything to add?
Okay. I think Mr. Cobb was clear exactly on that.
Mr. Cobb, is there any conclusion you draw from that?
I can speculate that many county employees aren't comfortable blowing the whistle on their boss.
Right. It's easier to buy the book, but not suffer the consequences of picking up the phone potentially.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. I really appreciate Councilmember Tucker's question. I was going to ask those two exact questions, and so I appreciate you asking them. And I guess I want to go back to something you said earlier, Mr. Cobb, which I so appreciate. And again, I think the investigation really speaks for itself on a number of different levels, but you indicated, and I totally agree with you, the awkwardness that comes from interviewing people on what is referred to as the second floor, that is where the county executive offices are and where the assistant chief administrative officers and among the highest level officials within county government reporting directly to the county executive. But does that awkward, were those folks interviewed as well? Because there was a high degree of level of uncomfort within the administration expressed privately by a number of people. And so and this may be a question of our Inspector General, but who was interviewed and how many people were interviewed within the administration to seek clarity on conversations that they may have had with Mr. Klein? And could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because you acknowledged, which I totally agree, the challenges with regards to conducting those type of interviews, and that factored into weighing the breadth of this particular investigation.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and or at least tell you what I would tell Megan Lamarzi, the Inspector General, what she should say if she were asked the questions. And this goes back to what Mr. Hucker was saying and what you're saying right now, is that her proper answer from my perspective would be, this is an ethics commission investigation that we conducted. Everything that we did is confidential, and I'm not at liberty to discuss with you anything related to that investigation. Take it to the ethics commission. So we're skipping a step there. Now you're asking the question of me as counsel to the ethics commission. Recall that I said before that in what I consider to be a great job done by the Inspector General, that they got 98% of the information that was readily available. Well, actually, they got all the information that was readily available. I would say it's fair for me to say it wasn't a huge deep dive. They were able to obtain a lot of the information that allows us to be having the conversation that we are today within a very narrow time frame. They started their investigation on September 6th, and they delivered a report on December 12th. And in connection with that, they contacted the people that they believed that they needed to in order to develop the information. Now, I've provided to the council, it's an attachment, it's part of the document that's public, the redacted OIG report. The redactions are to redact information relating to witness testimony. There's multiple witnesses that were contacted, and their testimony is confidential. And I think it's fair to say that the Inspector General went to the people with knowledge, the greatest knowledge regarding the matters that are relevant to the investigation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to hear you say that because you had comments about it, the awkwardness of those conversations with those folks, and I wanted to make sure that didn't preclude those conversations from happening, and you're acknowledging that they did, which I appreciate as part of the investigation. So I do appreciate Councilmember Rice's point with regards to potential implications here that could have legal consequences, the precedent that this may set moving forward for future investigations, and the unique challenges from a legal standpoint of this particular investigation, where it's never happened before, at least for in the recent history of the county. So I do think that it has implications for how we take these matters moving forward, and our public and our county employees and our appointed officials, all of us, need to be held obviously to standards that are very important. And so I do think those conversations may be worth having, and I would support having them. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be having additional discussions on this, as it's been pointed out a couple of times today. I did check with Councilmember Rice, and he believes it would be appropriate in the fall to have additional information. We need to give time. We need to give the ethics commission and staff time to get us information that we're asking for, and anyone that has additional information that they would like them to address, please let them know as well. With that, I have no other speakers on this topic. So what we're going to be doing now is go to recess. Might I remind my colleagues that coming back, I think this is another historic moment in Montgomery County. I believe we're going to have the most public hearings we have ever had in an afternoon. We're slated to have 19 public hearings, some of which are action items as well. So it would behoove all of us if we could all be back and start the meeting at 1:30, because we have close to 60 speakers as well. So it's close to 2 hours of speakers, so that we need to get started right on time so that we can continue the other important matters that we have in addition to the public hearings this afternoon. Thank you very much. See all of my colleagues back here no later than 1:30. Thank you very much. We are in recess.